was very happy when you accepted our invitation to be on our relay series. And I've got to be honest, when I went through I saw what you're doing, Lives Well Lived, it was mind blowing. I saw the clips and all I could think about was she's making magic. That's all I could think about. You're making magic. So, I would like to start by asking you one really important question, which I personally want to know, which is what inspired you to create Lives Well Lived? What was your
Yeah.
inspiration?
Well, I mean, you can see her right there, my
Yeah,
grandmother.
I can see her.
That
That's your
is
grandma?
That was my grandmother, and she lived to be 103 and a half. And I was looking at approaching 50, which I think, especially for women, is a pretty, that half century mark is a pretty big marker for us.
Yeah.
And I mean, for men too, but I think in particular women. And I was looking for positive role models of aging and just not finding them out there in the media. Everything was about everything you could do to avoid aging. And let's face it, the one thing we have in common is that we age each and every day. And in my own life, I had this amazing role model of my grandmother who at 100 was still working out at the gym. She did not start working out until she was 80. That's 80 years old. And so she really proved to me that it's never too late to start something new. And I think really that was what inspired me. And then I went back with her. She came out to visit me in California for 4 summers in a row. And one of the summers when she was turning 100, I went back with her to Florida, where she lived, and I went with her to the gym. And I thought I better film this because nobody's going to believe that at 100 she's still working out at the gym. And realizing that I needed to find other people out there like her who were living full and meaningful lives that could be my role models. I knew they existed. I just needed to find them.
I'm gonna be honest with you. Just seeing that what you're doing with Lives Well Lived, uh, I mean, it's enough to inspire me to want to have a life well lived. Just being honest.
Good.
Um, yeah, though. I mean, you have all these beautiful people who just who make aging look beautiful. They just make it look like you know, it's actually absolutely amazing that you are bringing these people to tell us about their lives so far, and it's inspiring people because I know a lot of young people who are scared of getting older, but I don't know what anyone's gonna think when they hear that you have a grandma who started to work out at 80 years old.
Yeah.
Wow. That's inspiration for anybody. Like from now on, if I tell someone you got to start to go to the gym, if they say anything, I'm gonna say I know someone who started at 80. You can do
Right.
it. That's
Exactly.
my
And I
new
think
inspirational line.
it's so much about your mindset. I mean, look, as we age, we do lose our physical strength. And one of the people in my film who was 97, I would go visit him and I'd say, Lou, how are you feeling? He'd say, well, it's not like when I was 95. I mean, that was his one-liner, right? Because that you're going to lose some of that physical strength. But I think what you lose maybe in physical strength, you make up for in years lived and in experience. And I also think that the people that thrive when they are aging are people that don't give up, that don't let the number of their age be an obstacle from keeping them from doing things. And maybe my grandmother wasn't lifting weights like somebody who's in their 20s, but she was there with her little 5 pound weights doing her thing, And I think do what you can. I mean, she always said, move it or lose it. And I think that that's so true. And so that is definitely a mindset that I found that really was in really in each of the people that I interviewed, because I interviewed 40 people. I like to say 40 people with a collective life experience of 3,000 years. They were all over the age of 75 when I interviewed them.
Okay, that's a lot. I don't even know how to react to that right now. I mean, it's quite a lot. But okay, you are just an amazing person. I've got to say that. Just give you your flowers. But I just want to ask you this question. In your journey, with lives were lived, as you have interviewed senior citizens, I want to know, is there any specific way that, or is there anything specific that has influenced you and affected your everyday life from just constantly interviewing these people?
Yeah, and I would think one thing is I don't call them senior citizens, I call them older
Okay.
adults because I think we live in a very age segregated world, and so I think it's, we I try not to put labels on people.
Hmm.
I think that, what I found was that the people that I interviewed really had four things in common. And
Yeah.
that I have taken hopefully into my own life. The first was having a sense of purpose. And I think that no matter what age we are, we need to have that sense of purpose. And whether it's, I had one person that I interviewed that would go in every morning to the high school and teach English as a second language. Lucky Lou, I mentioned that was 97. He was a retired pediatrician, but he made fresh mozzarella for his daughter's deli every morning. It's a vast array of what that sense of purpose is. I think in many ways it was about giving back and feeling like we were still productive in society. And that is a big takeaway. And that, your sense of purpose can change over your lifetime because I think a lot of people, they have a job for a certain number of years. And then when they retire from that job, they lose their identity a bit. And part of that is tied up in this sense of purpose of who we are and what we do. And I also see that with my college students when they realize, oh my goodness, I'm in the wrong major. What do I do now? I don't know what my sense of purpose is. So we need to have that to feel grounded and feel like we are part of something bigger than ourselves. And I think the second thing,
Very
speaking of
true.
feeling like we're part of something bigger than ourselves, is to have a real sense of community. And that community could be family, but more often than not, it's friends, people that we feel like we can call on, that we can count on, that we can tell the good times and the bad times, the things that are happening, but people that we feel connected to. And then I think third and fourth kind of go hand in hand, which is this sense of resilience and positivity. And having, all the people that I interviewed, because it was that generation that went through World War II and many different iterations, depending on where they lived in the world. From being interred in the United States because one woman was Japanese American, to having to flee Germany because somebody was Jewish, to, everybody had different stories, but they all had things that were happening that happened to them and how they faced that and how they overcame those obstacles and really learning. It's a cliche, but learning to look at life as the glass is half full rather than half empty. And I'm often reminded of Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning, where when I read it, what I took away from it is that there's so many times in our lives where we cannot control the things that are happening around us, but what we can control is our attitude about how we deal with those things. And attitude is so, so vitally important. Having that positive attitude and that mindset, I think, really also was a common trait. So like everybody else, I sometimes wake up on the wrong side of the bed. And then I think about all these amazing people in my film and what they went through. And I'm like, okay, give yourself an attitude adjustment, like reframe what's happening right now. And it's amazing
Mhm.
how that can change your whole day if you can do that. If you can take like that moment to pause and kind of realize when that's happening.
Yeah. And you mentioned something which is kind of like what we are, a major part of what we are about, like
Mhm.
clearing the stereotype between between older adults and the younger adults. It's just like we're all adults, but it's just there are older ones and there are younger ones. And I've seen older adults who do wonderful stuff, who are, I'm gonna be honest, who do way more interesting, more fun stuff than younger adults. That this is the truth.
Yeah.
So the stereotype kind of like puts a limit on the way we look at each other, and I completely agree with you on that one. So
Mhm.
isn't that I want to just ask you this question because I'm kind of curious. What was the most surprising thing you encountered in your interviews with the older adults?
Well, I don't know if it's surprising or not, but maybe it is. I mean, when I first started doing this project, I thought that I was going to be collecting all these words of wisdom. I mean, that's kind of why I started it, because I was like, okay, I need to find out what's the wisdom behind all these people. And as I started getting into the project, what I realized is, yes, I was collecting their words of wisdom, but I was also collecting these amazing stories and stories of resilience, stories of the things that these people went through, and that we often don't take the time to really listen to people's stories and what interesting stories everyone has. And, my motto now is everyone has a story to tell if we just take the time to listen.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think older adults have the most amazing stories to tell. Sometimes you sit down and you listen, you get wisdom, you get entertained, I mean, like it's a whole package. I
The full
completely agree
gamut,
with you.
right?
But I would like to know, what do you intend to achieve with lives well lived? What is your target as per people? Is there anything you're looking to achieve as per the with the documentary, probably with clearing stereotype or maybe anything else you have in mind?
Yeah, well, there's twofold. One is, I when I was working on this project, I read something, I think it was in the New York Times, that said the last 100 years is the first time in human history that we've looked to anyone other than our elders for advice. And I read that and I thought, wow, the world is suffering as a result of this. We look at Google, we look at our phones, but we forget to ask people who have lived those experiences before us. And history repeats itself. So it's nice to have that wisdom and to connect with that. And it just really hit me. I think because I grew up in a four-generational household, so I was used to having older adults and used to having that wisdom around me. I know I was lucky, but when you live it, sometimes you don't realize how lucky you are in that moment. And I think that what I'm trying to do with the film is we've now done intergenerational projects where we show the film to students and older adults, and we bring those groups of people together to get to know each other, to foster intergenerational connections, because I really feel like any other stereotype, when you don't know somebody from that other group, it's really easy to have a stereotype about them. And like any other ism, ageism is another ism. And so by bringing older adults and young people together, we break down those barriers of and stereotypes about ageism, one story and one connection at a time. And I think I said before, I think the world would be a better place if we really came together and understood each other. And of course, when we do these projects, because I've been doing this since 2018, where we do we call them the Lives Will Live Generations projects. What happens at the wrap parties, they get to meet each other for a whole quarter or semester, so 10 or 15 weeks, depending on the school. And at the end, they do a big presentation, the students do with the older adults. And of course, the biggest common thread is that they realize that they have far more in common than their differences. And really the only difference is their age. And what a gift that is at the end of that time that they realize that. And they make a new friend. And then maybe the next time that an older adult sees a younger person, they'll be more open to wanting to be friends with them and vice versa. I mean, I think making that connection is super, super important, making that first step happen.
Yeah. So, all right, Sky. So I want to ask you one question because now you interacted and you said something interesting. You grew in a four-generational home, so it's practically like you can be a perfect mediator between all ages. Like we got
Yeah.
Sky, she could tell you guys anything. So, I would like to ask you this question. So, for older adults, and this is about older adults, but I want you to talk to the younger adults. If you were to tell younger adults one thing, one huge misconception they have about older adults, because like you have interacted greatly, hugely with the older adults. So if there
Mhm.
is one misconception that you feel like younger adults have about older adults, what is one common misconception that most people you think most younger adults have that you would love for it to be cleared?
Well, I think just that older adults are really interesting people too. And I think that we dismiss sometimes older adults, younger people do, and that they feel like, oh, they're not technologically savvy and I'm not going to have anything to talk about. And in fact, that could not be farther from the truth. And, I think that if we take the time to really have a conversation and go scratch beneath the surface, and that's what we do in these projects that we do, what I do is we give them the questions that I used everyone to ask everyone in the film. So it's a starting point to have a dialogue. And I think, sometimes it's really hard to just sit two people down in a room and have a conversation if you don't have some starting point. So I think having that starting point really helps to foster that deeper understanding and that deeper meaning. And that maybe I think that knowing that and seeing the film helps, because you see people that we put a lot of footage of people when they were in their 20s and when they were younger. So you can see throughout their lifetime what they were like. And I think it connects you in a different way. And we can learn so much from talking to each other. I think that's the biggest thing, is really taking the time to connect and talk to each other. We learn so much.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that's very true. Plus, one thing about younger adults, because I would love to think I'm a younger adult, except the problem is you're always older in the presence of somebody younger. So I've had people call me old and like, come on. So
Yeah.
the thing is, as a younger adult, I can say that there is I this is a problem that I have pointed out before, but it's still something that happens. I don't know if it happens in everywhere, but in my country particularly, something happens that I personally don't think is a nice thing.
Mm.
So when people want to buy things for older adults, let's say things that are related to technology, maybe like a laptop or like a mobile phone, like a smartphone, they always want to go for the ones that are they say, oh, no, don't get something very complicated, or you're gonna get them confused. Or they say, don't get a complicated smartphone, get them something simple. I personally have a problem with that. I feel like you're denying them the opportunity to learn how to use these things. And I feel they have more than enough time on their hands to do that, to learn them. So, um, what do you think, or is there anything or any way you feel like we can breach that or we can change that stereotype? Because I personally, I don't like that thing where people want to get things for older adults and they feel like you got to get something that is not so complicated so you don't confuse them. I think it's a way of denying them the chance to learn it. So what can you say about this?
Again, I think it's bringing generations together so that younger people don't have those stereotypes, because younger people and older people come in many different flavors, many different shapes and sizes, many different technological, understandings. So I think it's that is a generalization, and that comes from not knowing people that are older, not spending time with people that are older. And also, I think it's really important to ask the older person, if you're getting something for an older person, ask them what they want. We sometimes forget to do that. I mean, I remember one time, and my grandmother was rarely in the hospital, but one time she was in the hospital, and I went back to Florida to be with her, and the doctor came in the room, and I think she was 102 at this point, but completely with it. And instead of talking to my grandmother, the doctor immediately started talking to me. And I looked at him and I said, I am not the patient, she is, and you need to talk to her. And so I think also we have a responsibility, if we're with somebody that's older, to make sure that they are being treated the way you would want to be treated. Treat everyone with the same respect and the same dignity and the same way that you would want to be treated. That's like such an easy thing to do. But if we all did that, it would be so much better. And my grandmother actually
Yeah.
ended up firing that doctor because he just wasn't listening to her, and he just couldn't get over that she was 102 and could make up her own decisions. And I mean, but it was an assumption based on a number, not based on the person. So I think it's really important to make sure that you check that out with each and every individual person. Yes, there are a number of people that are over 85 that have dementia of some form, but not everyone. And so you really need to be very careful that we're not making
Right.
assumptions without first checking.
Yeah. But it's just not that I want to digress, but you should have just said to the doctor, she started to work out at 80. You should have just
Yeah.
said that to she started to work out at 80. You should be careful how you talk to her. She's super
Yeah,
strong.
exactly.
Maybe the doctor would have been more careful because I don't think they know. And again, not just to ask you a personal question, why, what is the reason? Because I can tell just from having a conversation with you even before now, just to ask the question, what is it that makes you passionate about wanting to know about these stories? Why is it a passion to you?
I think it's always been a passion. I think that what I'm doing now as a filmmaker, it brings all the things that I have loved doing my whole life, which is storytelling, music, timing, and visual. I mean, and I love that. But I also know that my dad was a geriatric physician from the time that he got out of medical school, which was kind of unusual back 50 years ago. And he would come home from the nursing home and tell me all these great stories about the people that were his patients. And I am certain that that had an impact on me wanting to tell people stories and to really be present and to be there, much like he was when he was a doctor doing his rounds and not just treating patients. They were people. And I think that to him, and their stories were important. And it was important to give those people the time and the space to tell their stories, even when they were in the hospital or in a nursing home. He still, that was something that was really very important to him, was to know all of his patients and not, it's very easy to like have a patient and they just become kind of like almost like a number instead of a person. And when you know somebody and you know their story, it's a very different relationship that you have with them.
It's very true. And just to add to this, you said something about knowing somebody, and it adds to the experience. I think generally, as human beings, we forget the importance of connecting with people as people instead of just statistics or numbers or something like that. And I think that's the
Absolutely.
most common thing. It's the most common thing. And
Mhm.
there's something that I tell people whenever I hear people say, I want to be by myself, I just want to work and work and work. And I'm like, I remind people that you're going to get to a certain age in your life and you're going to want to talk to people. It's natural. This is just, you have just done so much in your life and you have
Right.
been through so much. You are definitely going to, if you live long enough, you're definitely going to get to the point where you have now gotten so much knowledge, so much experience, and you just want to tell someone about some of them. It's
Yeah.
natural.
Yeah.
So,
Absolutely.
all this is kind of like part of our human experience. And I feel like one way we can maximize our potentials as human beings is through storytelling. Like, because I personally know that whatever we know about the past is through stories. Whatever we know
Hmm.
about history is through stories. So I personally
Yep.
admire what you do with lives well lived. And
Hmm.
just to ask another question, you mentioned that you have been doing this for quite a while, and
Hmm.
that it has there is I think there is no way it will not affect your personal life in some kind of way. So, in what kind of ways has this experience with this period of time affected your life as a person?
Well, I think I take more time to enjoy the moment, after interviewing all these people. I also think that it has changed what I do because up until the time that I started making the film, I'd never made a film before. This is my first film. And I'm super excited that it ended up on public broadcasting here in the United States. I mean, it was just a labor of love. I knew I had to do it. I've always followed my passion, and this was just another one of those projects. But now I'm working on three other films. And so it's completely changed the trajectory of what, in quotes, my third act is looking like, because I retired from teaching so that I could do my filmmaking full time. I had a 30-year career of teaching, which I loved. And now I'm teaching in different ways, which is doing the intergenerational work, continuing those projects, and working on films, all of which in some way or another will have an intergenerational twist to them. So it's been a completely life altering experience.
Yeah, I can tell just from the fact that you smile enough. I can tell it's been amazing. And what in what ways would you like for your for lives well lived? Because I'm personally gonna if it's available, I'm gonna recommend it to as many people as I know. Because so I want to ask, what impact do you hope to achieve with this documentary?
Well, I think that, again, connecting generations. I also think having people want to be curious about older adults and their stories. And in fact, there is a place on the Lives Well Lived website called Take Action, where people can download the questions that I use to interview everyone. So if you have a loved one, an older adult in your life, you can use those questions to interview your loved one. Or if you want to do it yourself, you're an older person and you want to do it yourself. I mean, I think sometimes there's a value in that because people might not recognize that they want to do it until it's too late. So it's nice to have some of those questions answered. And again, I can't reiterate it enough. I think this idea of connecting generations and breaking down the barriers between generations and the stereotypes that exist, and to try and overcome the big stereotype of ageism, which is another ism that a lot of people don't talk about, but it truly exists. And so what can we do to connect people, to break down those barriers, and to bring people together?
Yeah, thank you very much. That's pretty nice. So, just in interviewing the people, because this is like about older adults, so it's a really interesting topic for me. So, is
Mhm.
there anything that was recurring, or is there anything that kept recurring, like amongst all of them, or like they all had entirely different things generally, or is like anything recurring, like amongst all of your interviewees?
Yeah, I mean, I think those four things that I talked about: sense of purpose, sense of community, resilience, and positivity. Those were the four things that were recurring. It wasn't like, oh, I work out every day or I eat really healthy. That was really not the main focus. It was those four main things: sense of purpose, community, resilience, and positivity.
All right. So from your interaction with them, I believe you had a lot of interaction with them, and you must have learned about their what they consider to be their mistakes, their
Mhm.
success, everything about it. So based on their experiences, what advice can you give to younger adults as they are on their own journey to getting to being older adults? What advice can you give to younger adults?
Yeah. Well, if you follow me on LinkedIn or Facebook, follow Lives Well Lived, you'll find, and my name, Sky Bergman, on LinkedIn. Every Thursday, I kind of put out there what people have learned from these intergenerational connections that happen. And so there's the words of wisdom. And then on my website, all the film stars, I picked my favorite quotes from each of those film stars. I like to call the people that I interviewed film stars. And so there are a couple that bubble to the surface. One of them is like, luck has the aroma of perspiration. I love that one. Like, be prepared, work hard. The other one, which comes from Lucky Louie, is you can be happy with what you have, or miserable with what you don't have. You decide. And I think that goes along with that idea of your attitude. So there's some really great quotes that I think bubble up from all those wonderful interviews that I did.
Oh, wow. That's beautiful. It's simple but beautiful. And for me, I think it's far reaching, those little quotes. Sometimes it feels like people just bring a whole experience and just pack it in one quote. And it's like, do it what you think. But you said something, I don't know. I would love to go through those quotes because I personally think the few ones you mentioned are insightful. You can't be miserable with what you don't have. That's huge.
Pretty
And
amazing. So those are on, anyone can see those on the website. And also, I think we talked about this earlier on, before this interview. that I wrote a book because I had so many people like you who wanted to know, okay, you've interviewed all these people, you have these 3,000 years of experience. What did you learn? So I finally wrote a book that is on Amazon. So I think it's available worldwide. Where I have the quotes from everyone are there, and also like what my learning experience was, because I was a first time filmmaker. I had no idea of what I was doing. So how do you fund something like this? How do you make it happen? How do you get it into movie theaters? I mean, not the ins and outs of that, but more like the idea of how do you persevere. And in Japanese, there's a word gaman, which is to power through basically and keep going and make it happen. And I think for me, having this passion, I think if you follow your passion, it will never lead you astray. Follow where your heart takes you. And I didn't know I was going to make a feature film. I just started interviewing all these people, and look where it got me, to a very life-changing event that I've been forever altered because of it. Because now I have a whole new career. I've been able to speak about it. I have changed other people's lives. I get so many incredible emails from people that have seen the film or read the book, and it's amazing. It's really, truly amazing. What a gift.
All right. So, again, this is it's interesting what you're doing, and I think it's really great what you're doing because it's like you said, it's breaching a generational gap. You're not only telling older adults that they are capable of more than they allow themselves. You're doing that on one hand, and on the other hand, you're telling younger adults that being an older adult can be beautiful. It is not terrifying. It is not scary. It is a beautiful experience. It is like growing into being a teenager. It's just another experience. It's just,
Exactly.
yeah, I feel like it's
Every stage
very,
of life offers something new and different. And I think, instead of fearing aging, it's lovely to see young adults, especially after they work on this intergenerational project, realize that instead of fearing aging, they can be looking forward to it. And we tend to, because of what we see in the media, we tend to fear aging. We tend to try and do whatever we can to look younger, I mean, the media really puts that out there for us. It's changed in the last 10 or 15 years since I started working on this project. I'm really happy to see more older adults that are being spotlighted in films and in TV series, and also intergenerational things showing up in TV series and movies. And, that's lovely, but that certainly was not the case like 15 years ago. That just wasn't out there. It was all about how to stay youthful, how to look young. And so why wouldn't we? If that's what we're hearing all the time, then that puts in our minds that we should fear growing old, when in fact that is not the case at all. And I think what we were seeing in the media up until more recently were all the negative aspects of growing old, and I think that's a problem, and that's why that was what started me on this path with this film. So I also just wanted to say, if anyone wants to look at the other work that I'm doing, because I am working on 3 other films at the moment, and I have another one that's completed, you can go to my website, which is just skybergmanproductions.com, and I'm sure you'll put that in the show notes. But that will lead you to Lives Will Live. It'll lead you to the book and to the other films that I'm working on right now. And also, if anyone wants to connect, my contact info is on the website. So.
yeah, thank you very much for making yourself very available. But now, still on the film making thing, but just to digress a little, because you said something important. You said something about what we see on social media affecting us. Now, I just want to make a quick comment on that because I found something really interesting on that particular thing, what you see. And I think it's quite important that people know this. So there's an interesting study on older adults. Quite interesting. I found it fascinating because this study was done as an experiment. So they put older adults in a space
Mhm.
and made them put away those who were using canes to walk, put away your canes. They put TVs like it was in their time, not new TVs. You don't have flashy TVs. No, they put all the old TVs like black and white TVs, and then they put the setting to look like when they were younger. Now,
Uh-huh.
this is the interesting thing that happened. they were disconnected from everything that suggested the new era they really were in. So everything was like back to the past. It was like everybody did a time travel.
Yeah.
So at the end of the studies, they were told to act and walk and talk and imagine that this was the time they were in. So it's like relive your youth. And now this is the
Uh-huh.
interesting thing about the study. When the study was done, it
Hmm.
was discovered that most of the adults had developed better eyesight.
Yeah.
They had started to walk straight. Some of them were walking straighter. They had developed better cognitive abilities. And it just shows that what you see and what you allow to get in can totally influence your entire being.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, there's also something really interesting, a little bit on this same note, where a good friend of mine did a film called Alive Inside. It's probably about 10 or 12 years old at this point. But his idea, this was older adults that did have dementia, and he put on little nanopods at the time music from when they were younger, and all of a sudden they would listen to that music and they would come alive. Some people that hadn't even spoken in years all of a sudden would start speaking because it goes to a different part of our brain. And so thinking about how we can connect with people on multiple levels, and music is certainly one of those levels. One of the films that I'm working on now, called The Primetime Band, is all about older adults coming back to music later in life and paying it
Mhm.
forward by introducing music to 8-year-olds. And I love that intergenerational cycle, but music has that ability to connect, and also within our own being to connect to younger memories, to different times. I mean, it's how many times have you listened to a piece of music and all of a sudden it brings you back to a moment? And so that's kind of an interesting, that's a good film to check out for those of you that are watching.
Yeah. And you for the movie it's a documentary, but I think it's also like a movie because you can like have fun watching it. Is
Mhm.
there like a it can be seen on your website, correct?
It's not, it's on Amazon, iTunes, Canopy,
Okay.
people that are in the States. So it can be seen on a number of different platforms. Yeah, it's definitely
Beautiful.
available and out there. And
Oh,
if for some reason you have a hard time finding it, just email me from the Sky Bergman Productions website and I will help you figure it out.
of course. You are an amazing person, of course. So very happy to hear that. Okay. And I would also like to ask you personally, what advice um what advice can you give to older adults who still have a passion for something, but are in one way or another still finding it difficult to start something? And I'm telling you, I'm asking you because you have firsthand seen your grandma start working out at 80, and you have started making movies after all these years of experience.
Mhm. The hardest part is finding out what you're passionate about and where you want to put your energy. And I think once you have figured that out, either taking a class, being around other people that are doing it, doing a project, working sometimes with a nonprofit where you're doing something where you're around other people that are like-minded, that want to contribute in some ways. I think those are all really good ways to start something new. I mean, my mom is writing a book about her life, and she signed up for a writing class that she does on Zoom every Tuesday. And that, I think that there is something about sharing that experience and working with other people that really can make a big difference in terms of keeping that kind of passion alive. And I know even when I was working on the film, I had other people that were helping me, and that kept me going, and the hard moments that kept me going. I think my grandmother going to the gym, for her, it was a social outlet as well as working out. She really enjoyed seeing all the people that she worked out with. So I think there is an element of that that's important as well.
Thank you. Thank you. That's really good. All right. And finally, I just want to ask you one more just one question based on your uh it, what do you think community and relationship play in enhancing quality life for seniors? Or do you think it plays any major role?
Well, I mean, I think I mentioned that one of the
I'm
four things that really everyone had in common that was living a well-lived life was having a sense of community. I think it's hugely important to figure out how to have a sense of community. And, that can come in a variety of different ways. A lot of times our family is farther away and we don't get to see our family as much. So we have to create our own community, whether that's, like I said, working with a nonprofit group or taking classes even on Zoom so that you connect with other people who are doing things that you want to be doing. I started in my early 40s because I wanted to develop a good system and connection of women. I started having women's potluck dinner every month, the first Monday of every month. And that has grown to something like 150 people are on the email list now for that. And so not all of them come at one time, thankfully, but that helped me build my network beyond where I was working and my job. It helped me build a network of really interesting women who were from the ages of 20 to in their 90s. And I think having that breadth, and you have to make it happen. It's not just going to come to you, so you have to really think about how can I form my community? How can I join an organization, or how can I start something like the women's dinner and make that happen so that I feel like I am part of something bigger than myself?
which is very important. So you just said something really important, and I think this is a huge takeaway for everyone to be a part of something bigger than yourself. I think it gives you a higher sense of purpose and a reason to just keep going. Wake up every morning and just keep going. I
Hmm.
think that's really, really beautiful. All right, so Sky Bergman, I'm gonna ask you for just a random piece of advice because you have a wealth, in my opinion, this is you have a wealth of experience. I feel like you have received the experience of 3,000 years. That's what I think.
Yes, I've been
You
lucky.
have, I think you have experience of 3,000 years. You have 3,000 years worth of experience. So, out of your 3,000 years worth of experience, what advice can you give to us that can be useful in our journey as people generally, both older adults and younger adults? What advice can you give from your standpoint with your experience of 3,000 years? What can you tell us?
Yeah, I think that the advice that I'll give you actually comes from my grandmother. So I needed to look no further than just my grandmother, which is to always be kind. And I think that when we're kind to each other, it's amazing, just saying a kind word to somebody or doing something nice for somebody. You feel so much better too when you do that, and it lights
Mm.
the other person up. And I think that I try every day to just be kind, even like you're in the grocery store in line. Strike up a conversation with the other person, smile at them. You don't know what their day's been like. You talking to them or smiling at them or saying hello could make all the difference in the world. So I think the best piece of advice to live a good life is to always be kind.
Well, I couldn't agree more because some of my best days were probably the days where I had some random conversation and I'm just at home and I'm thinking about this random smiles. I'm like, oh, that's beautiful. Sometimes it feels better than any meal you can have. So I completely agree with you.
Yeah.
Or all right. Thank you very much, Sky, for your time
Thank
and
you.
sharing your wealth of experience. It has been more than fascinating. Whether it was now or before when we had a conversation, you have been absolutely fascinating. And I will do my best to reach out whenever I have any questions because you have a wealth of experience. Again, thank you very much for your time and for giving us all of your advice and experience. We really appreciate that and would love to see more and hear more from you, especially with your upcoming projects. We'd love to see and be a part of it if possible. I mean, because I'm a movie person, so it's really nice to have this conversation. It's really been insightful. Thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thank you for asking.
All right. So with that, I'd say we have come to the the end of the session, and hopefully we can have. Well, I really look forward to having a physical session in the future. So I hope that works out. All right. So thank you very much again, and Everyone, you have a beautiful morning, afternoon, or evening.